We're going to talk about surrounding density and diverse uses under the location and transportation creditive lead. The main objectives of surrounding density and diverse uses is to conserve land, particularly farmland and wildlife habitat, by encouraging development in areas with already existing infrastructure. This is done to promote walkability, transportation efficiency, and reduce vehicular distance traveled, in order to improve public health by encouraging daily physical activity. This slide describes the points that a building can earn under surrounding density and diverse uses. Core and shell schools, etc., can earn LEED credits under the following categories. Uh, Option 1, surrounding density, or Option 2, diverse uses, which we'll be talking about in a second. Under surrounding density, these should be located on a site whose surrounding existing density within a quarter-mile radius of the project boundary meets a bunch of values. Physical education spaces that are part of the project site, such as playing fields, associated buildings used during sporting events, and playgrounds, are excluded from the development density calculations. This is applicable only for schools. Buildings that fall under the BD plus C category, such as new construction, etc., except core and shell, can earn 2 to 3 points upon fulfilling this criteria, whereas buildings under core and shell can earn 2 to 4 points after the fulfillment of these criteria. It's the values that the building has to meet to gain the required LEED credits. Either the values under separate residential and non-residential densities can be used for calculation, or the combined density values can be used, but both can't be used together. The same information mentioned in the previous slide is applicable to values mentioned in metric units here in the table. Under option 2, diverse uses, a building can earn 1 or 2 points if it's constructed or renovated such that its entrance is within half a mile walking distance of the main entrance of 4 to 7 or 8 or more existing and publicly available diverse uses. However, the following restrictions apply. A use counts as only one type. For example, if a retail store sells more products in several categories, it may be counted only once. No more than 2 uses in each use type may be counted. If 5 restaurants are within walking distance, then only 2 restaurants will be counted. Uses must also represent at least 3 of the 5 category, exclusive of the building's primary use. Warehouses and distribution centers can earn LEED credits under Option 1, Development and Adjacency, if they're constructed or renovated on a previously developed site that was used for industrial or commercial purposes. If they satisfy this criteria, they earn 2 points, or they're located on a site which is both previously developed and an adjacent site. The adjacent site must be currently used for industrial or commercial purposes. If this is fulfilled, then they earn 3 points. Eligible for LEED accreditation under transportation resources if it's constructed or renovated on a site such as 2 or 3 or 4 of the following transportation resources. If the site's within a 10-mile driving distance of a main logistics hub such as airport or seaport, or if the site's within a 1-mile driving distance of an off-ramp to a highway or an access point to an active freight rail line, or if the site is served by an active freight rail spur. In all these cases, the surrounding transportation resources must be complete within 24 months of that date of occupancy of the site. Buildings that fall under the healthcare category can earn 1 LEED point under Option 1, Surrounding Density, if they are located on a site whose surrounding existing density within a quarter-mile radius of the project boundary is at least 7 dwelling units (DU) per acre with a 0.5 floor area ratio. The counter density must be existing density and not zone density, or at least 22,000 square feet per acre of buildable land. For previously developed existing rural healthcare campsites, should achieve a minimum development density of 30,000 square feet per acre in order to earn this LEED point. Healthcare facilities may earn 1 more LEED point under Option 2, Diverse Uses, if they constructed or renovated on a building site such that the building's main entrance is within half a mile walking distance of the main entrance of at least 7 operational and publicly accessible uses. There are certain restrictions that apply to this criteria. These restrictions are similar to Option 2, Diverse Uses under new building and core and shell facilities. Reed has stipulated quarter of a mile and half a mile as standard distances because people prefer to walk no more than a quarter of mile or 5 minutes to casual destinations and no more than half a mile for regular trips. Therefore, locating different kinds of destinations close to each other achieves a long list of documented environmental and social benefits such as reducing the length of vehicular trips and total air pollution, also while reducing the per capita pedestrian and bicycle injuries and deaths as well, moreover improving community members' health. The site selection for buildings that fall into the category of building design and construction, including core and shell, should follow the following suggestion. The site selection should be limited to areas within the central business district of a city or town center. Moreover, preference have to be given to areas of development that include residential uses. Infill sites and existing buildings should be identified so that they meet the needs of the project. The second step in this process is to identify eligible options. There are two options, and projects except healthcare can pursue both options. Option 1 is for projects in very dense locations. Density can be spot checked on an aerial map to determine whether calculations can demonstrate credit achievement. Option 2 is for projects that are very close to a variety of amenities and services. If the main entrance is within walking distance of diverse uses, then this option can be investigated in addition to option 1. However, healthcare projects are eligible only for a single option. The following steps are used to identify if a building can gain LEED credits under option 1 surrounding density. The first step of this process is to identify building sites and buildable land within required radius of project site. On a map, a quarter mile radius is plotted around the project site from the project boundary. Building site types as residential, non-residential, or mixed use are indicated along with indicating the buildable land. Project buildings or non-habitable spaces such as parking garages are not included in this quarter mile radius. To deals with the collection of information on density, it's always a good idea to have sufficient information beforehand. If the project team can't determine the number of dwelling units in the surrounding land, then combined density calculations can be used. Even if the number of dwelling units are known, uh, it's good to start with an area featuring dense buildings to see if the threshold is exceeded or not. These threshold values correspond to values mentioned in tables 1A and 1B mentioned beforehand. Separate residential and non-residential density calculations. Each building within a quarter of mile radius is designated as either residential, non-residential, or mixed-use building. Total number of dwelling units per acre for all residential buildings and total floor area ratio for all non-residential buildings are calculated. In the case of mixed-use buildings within this radius, equations 1 and 2 mentioned in the upcoming slides are used to find a weighted average of the residential and non-residential components, and finally all the values are added together in the appropriate category. Values of mixed-use buildings as dwelling units obtained from the equations shown below in this slide should be added to residential land and non-residential land uses appropriately. If residential and non-residential densities cannot be found out, then step 4 is used to calculate the combined density. According to equation 3, combined density equals the total floor area divided by total buildable land. In this calculation, parking garages are excluded. For buildings with simple rectilinear footprints, the floor area is estimated by measuring the building footprint area and multiplying it by the number of floors. Once the appropriate density calculations are performed, then step 5 is used to determine the points earned. Tables 1A and 1B mentioned in the previous slides can be used to determine the points earned. For separate calculation, that is independent residential and non-residential calculations, the lowest performing land use is used to determine the number of points achieved.
Option 2, diversity of uses. Step 1, documenting the nearby uses. Conduct a survey of existing uses that are eligible in or near the project. Then classify the uses types according to the Appendix 1. Uses that are planned but are not currently operating must be occupied within 1 year of the date of the lead project certificate of occupancy. Based on the credit requirement, determine the number of categories of uses that contribute to the credit achievement, also considering the restriction of the number of uses of each type. The second step is to map the walking routes to the uses. Label the eligible uses and mark walking routes from the main entrance of the project on the map. Measure the distance along each walking route to determine whether it meets the credit distance requirements. In the example, we can see that the supermarket, which is 1 by 8 miles, and the restaurant, which is 1 by 4 miles from the project site, meets the credit distance requirement and qualify for the credit calculation. Whereas the bank, which is 1 by 8 miles from the project site and which is greater than half a mile walking distance from the project site, does not meet the credit distance requirement and hence does not qualify for the credit calculation. Warehouses and distribution centers. The first step is to choose the project location. The project location can be selected by considering the location, that is, a previously developed site used for industrial or commercial purposes, or a site which is adjacent to the sites currently used for industrial or commercial purposes, or a site which is close to transportation as per the credit criteria. Further, select option 1, which is for the projects located on previously developed sites with or without adjacency to the previous development. Or select option 2, which is the projects sited near the transportation resources as mentioned in the credit criteria. If applicable, select both the options. Option 1 is development and adjacency. The first step is to confirm previous development and use of the site. Indicate the previous development on the map of the site and calculate the percentage of the site that was previously developed. Note that the land should be 75% previously developed to be considered as a previously developed site. If applicable, the second step is to determine the adjacent site status. To earn additional points, confirm the project site is located on an adjacent site. An adjacent site is a site having at least continuous 25% of its boundary bordering parcels that are previously developed sites. Adjacent sites must be currently used for industrial or commercial purposes. An adjacent site can be identified using zoning maps or parcel maps. Option 2 is transportation and resources. The step 1 is to measure the driving distance from the project site to any transportation resources. Plot the driving routes from the project site to any applicable transportation resource on the map as mentioned in the credit criteria. Indicate all the driving distances to each resource. The step 2 is to confirm completion or construction of existing and planned transportation resources. Any transportation resource which is completed or will be under construction within 24 months of the project completion can be counted for the option 2. From the table 2, we can see that the total land area is of 130 acres, out of which the residential and non-residential areas are 60 acres each and the area for mixed use is 10 acres. The project determines that 80% of total mixed-use building floor area is residential and other 20% is non-residential. The land area can be proportionally allocated using equations 1 and 2. Hence, the mixed-use residential land is 8 acres and the mixed-use non-residential land is 2 acres. The residential density is 10 dwelling units per acre. The non-residential density can be calculated in floor area ratio. Floor area ratio is the density of non-residential land use exclusive of parking measured as the total non-residential building floor area divided by the total buildable area available for non-residential structures. For example, if a site has 10,000 square feet of buildable area, the floor area ratio would be 1. The non-residential space within the radius is 1,600,000 square feet and the non-residential land area is 2,700,720 square feet. On dividing the non-residential space by the land area, the non-residential density is 0.59. The table 4 summarizes the residential and non-residential densities.
This example summarizes the diversity